Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy, speaking to you from the land of Israel. Today we are about to discuss the pagan practices of peoples in the West in ancient times before they became Christians. And we're going, and even continued after that, and we're going to show how some of these practices testify to the Israelite origin of the Hebrew antecedents, of the Hebrew ancestry of the peoples in question. We're talking about Beltain, the custom of Beltain, which was practiced in Scotland, in Ireland, in northern England, and according to some sources also in Scandinavia. And this practice was known as Beltain in the British Isles. The term Beltain means fire, tain, Beltain, tain of Bel. Bel is another way of pronouncing the name Baal. Baal was an ancient Canaanite god that the Israelites, when they were in the land of Israel, also worshipped. They worshipped foreign gods. They worship the Baal, as the Bible testifies to us on several occasions. The Bible also warns us not to do this, not to worship the Baal. And a form of worship connecting with the Baal was known as Moloch. Moloch, which had different forms of worship, included different forms of worship. Moloch also meant passing through the fires, jumping over the fires, sacrificing to the fires, burning up victims to the fires. It was connected with fire worship, and different forms of fire worship. It was known as Moloch, and it was also associated with the worship of the Baal, and this is what the Canaanites used to do, and the Israelites were warned not to do it, but they did do it, as the Bible testifies to us. And when they were warned not to do it, they've been told that if they transgress, if they commit this prohibition, they will be exiled. And indeed they were exiled. The northern 10 tribes were exiled. We had 12 tribes of Israel. They divided into 2 different sections. In the north we had the 10 tribes of Israel. And in the south we had the kingdom of Judah, which comprised other tribes such as Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and representative minorities of all of the others. And from the kingdom of Judah came the present-day Jews. But those in the north were lost. They were exiled by the Assyrians, taken into exile, and they moved. We have shown how they moved. They moved to the west. They moved in different pathways. Some of them moved overland. They went up into the north, into what is now southern Russia, and further eastward even, but then they were driven westward in stages in different groups, where they all went to the same areas. They all came westward. Another portion were taken by sea. They're taken to Spain and to the British Isles and to Scandinavia and to what is now France, and from there they moved further inland and further northward. And the 2 different sections of the Israelite nations converged. They recoalesced. The different peoples came from different areas and regrouped, resettled in the same regions. Sometimes they didn't know who they were. They didn't realize that they were, in effect, joining up once again with their own kith and kin, and they fought with each other, and the conquests were made. But in the end, they settled down. And this has been proven by history and shown by historical studies, such as we have conducted and written about. So now we are going to discuss one of the pagan practices known as Beltain, or in the West, and in the Bible as Moloch. We're going to show how this same practice was continued, and it in its own way proves the Israelite origin of the people in question. Now we know that the northern Israelites, the 10 tribes, are separated from Judah. We told about this in the book of 1 Kings, in the book of 1 Kings 12:9. Jeroboam, the first king of the northern Israelites, he set up 2 golden calves, one in Bethel and the other in Dan, as we are told in 1 Kings 12:8. Jeroboam appointed priests from the lower section of the community, from the common people, the lower classes. Instead of the Levites, he replaced the Levites with others. See 1 Kings 12:31. And the northern Israelites that were separate, they adopted pagan customs. They degenerated, they deteriorated. This process continued for about 200 years. And in the end, they were exiled. They were taken away in stages by the Assyrians to different portions of the Assyrian Empire, different areas. And from there, they moved westward, but in the process they forgot who they were. They lost their ancestry. They are known as the Lost 10 Tribes of Israel, and we have traced them to Western Europe and also to the British Isles, that is Ireland and Britain. And this is what happened. Before they were exiled, they had worshipped foreign idols. They'd gone in the ways of the nations around them, as described in 2 Kings 17, verses 7 to 18. And in their places of exile, they continued to worship foreign idols. They would continue to worship the Baal, which, as had been prophesied, Hosea chapter 2, verses 16 to 17, and other verses in the same chapter testify to this. And one of their practices of worshipping the Baal apparently included the Beltain, the fire of Baal, the fire of Beltain. And the Beltain is the same as the worship of Moloch. Moloch, which was connected with the Baal, with the worship of the Baal, as we find in Jeremiah 32:35. Moloch had been specifically forbidden, prohibited by the Bible, as we find in Leviticus 18:21, and in Leviticus 20, chapter 2. Not only the Israelites, but we also find that the Canaanites in Lebanon, that is, the people known as the Phoenicians, also worshipped, had a similar form of worship, and apparently the Israelites borrowed it from them. Wikipedia, on the entry of Moloch tells us that the rabbinical tradition depicted Moloch as a bronze statue heated with fire, to which the victims were thrown. It was used for a human sacrifice. And also this has been associated with reports by Greeks and Roman authors concerning child sacrifices in Carthage in northern Africa to Baal Hamon. Carthage was founded by Phoenicians. It was founded in the area now known as Tunisia. Carthage was founded by Phoenicians, and also there too they practiced, had the custom of sacrificing children to a bronze statue, and this form of sacrifice was associated with Moloch, what is known as Moloch. The Moloch might be related to the term Melech. They both use the same word root. Melech means king or ruler. Moloch might denote royalty, or Moloch might also be associated with the word root Holek. Moloch, in this case, would be the present tense of the verb root Holek. Moloch is the present tense of Holek, means pass over, carry over, and both connotations could be applicable, are applicable, and they could have influenced the evolution of this word, and this is not exceptional. Quite a few words in Hebrew may be related to different word roots, and the relationship is valid in each case. We find the prohibition against Moloch several times in the Bible. In Leviticus 18 it says, "You shall not give any of your offspring to offer them to Moloch, nor shall you profane the name of the Lord your God. I am the Lord." And he continues, "Do not defile yourselves by any of these things, for by all these the nations which I am casting out before you became defiled. For the land has become defiled, therefore I have brought its punishment upon it. So the land has spewed out its inhabitants." And he goes on, verse 28. "So that the land will spew you out, should you defile it, as it has spewed out the nation which has been before it." So Moloch, as well as other prohibitions which are enumerated in this passage, was one of the things the Israelites were specifically, expressly warned not to do. And if they were to do it, they would be punished, and their punishment would involve being exiled from the land. We also find in Leviticus chapter 20, it says, "The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, You should also say to the sons of Israel, any man from the sons of Israel or from the aliens sojourning in Israel, who gives any of his offspring to Moloch, shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I will also set my face against that man and will cut him off from among his people, because he has given some of his offspring to Moloch, so as to defile my sanctuary and to profane my holy name. The people of the land, however, should never disregard that man when he gives any of his offspring to Moloch, so as not to put him to death. Then I myself will set myself against that man and against his family. I will cut off from among their people both him and all those that play the harlot after him, by playing the harlot after Moloch. And he goes on, and in verse 20 onwards, 22, verse 22 onwards, he says, "You therefore to keep all my statutes and all my ordinances and do them, so the land to which I am bringing you to live will not spew you out. Moreover, you shall not follow the customs of the nations which I will drive out before you, for they do all those things. For they did all these things. Therefore, I have abhorred them. Hence I said to you, you are to possess their land, and I myself will give it to you to possess it, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has separated you from the peoples." In 2 Kings, chapter 23, verse 10, it says that he, King Josiah of Judah, also defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, that no man may make his son or his daughter pass through the fire for Moloch. So we see this was a pagan custom that the Israelites and also people from Judah had adopted, and is mentioned in the Bible. Jeremiah also speaks about the practice of Moloch. He associates it with the worship of Baal, as the rabbinical commentators of Babylon and Malbim also mention. Jeremiah 32, verse 35, it says, "They built the high places of Baal that are in the valley of Ben Hinnom to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire to Moloch, which I not commanded them, nor had it entered my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin." And the Talmud also discusses the worship of Moloch, and there are differences of opinion in the Talmud, but we see from historical studies that all of the different opinions were correct. They all had an application. And there is an opinion that in order to be liable for punishment for performing the ceremony of Moloch, the idol in question had to be called Moloch. Another opinion says it wasn't the name of an idol, but it was the name of a process, of a form of worship, similar to prostrating oneself, or sacrificing an animal, or by cutting its throat, or different other forms of worship. Moloch was one of them. And others say that no, it involved any form of idolatry, any form of adultery that involved passing the seed. In other words, either taking the offspring of a person and passing it over the fires or through the fires, or causing it to jump over the fires, or casting it into the fire. All of that was included in the worship of Moloch. Rashi, the commentator Rashi, a very important commentator, said one of the forms of Moloch was making two different fires, one on each side, and causing the children to be passed through them. Apparently also they required that the person should not sacrifice all of his children, but only part of them. And the reason for this was that by having the belief behind this apparently was that by a person offering up part of his seed, part of his children, some of his offspring, those who remained would be blessed and protected. And then we have the custom of Beltain, which we find amongst Western peoples. This custom, Beltain, as we said, it means a fire bell. There's a description of it in the book, An Etymological Dictionary of the Scottish Language by John Jameson, printed in Edinburgh, 1808, page 163. It says there was a feast known as Beltain, which in Scottish means fire bell. The custom in Britain, Sweden and Northern Europe for jumping over fires and leading cattle and so on through the smoke and flames at the Feast of Beltain is a pagan Canaanite custom still practiced until very recently in Northern Europe, in Celtic and Scandinavian lands. Bel, god of the Britons, was also known as Belus or Belinus, similar to Bel or Belus, the Assyrian form of Baal. So there we have it. Was a Middle Eastern custom, was associated with Baal, And this is what they did. It involved fires, jumping over fires, passing through fires, and the like. And it has been prophesied that the Israelites, in their places of exile, will continue to worship Baal until they return, until in the end times they repent of this. Isaiah chapter 2, verses 16 to 17 says, "It will come about in that day, declares the Lord, that you will call me Ishi, that is Ishi, you will call me my husband, and will no longer call me Baali, that is my Baal. Baal connotes master, my ruler. For I will remove the name of the Baals. I will remove the names of the Baals, that is different idols known as Baal, or Baalim in Hebrew. I will remove the names of the Baals from their mouth, so that they will be mentioned by their names no more." But from this it is clear that they had been, that they would have been, they would still have remembered the Baals until the time came for them not to do so. We also have an entry in Wikipedia, Beltain, and we'll read a few extracts from this, as it says more or less the same thing. It gives a few more extra details. It says this was a Gaelic meaning is a Northern Scottish and an Irish May Day festival. It is most commonly held on the 1st of May, or about halfway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. Historically, it was widely observed throughout Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man. And it is one of the 4 Gaelic seasonal festivals. It's mentioned in some of the earliest Irish literature. It is associated with important events in Irish mythology. It marked the beginning of a summer and was when cattle were driven out to the summer pastures. Rituals were performed to protect the cattle, crops and people and to encourage growth. Special bonfires were kindled and their flame, smokes and ashes were deemed to have protective powers. The people and the cattle would walk around the bonfire or between 2 bonfires and sometimes leap over the flames or embers. All household fires would be doused and then relit from the Beltain bonfire. These gatherings would be accomplished by a feast, and some of the food and drink would be offered. Doors, windows, byres and cattle themselves would be decorated with yellow mayflowers, perhaps because they evoked fire. And the like. According to the 17th century historian Geoffrey Keating, there was a great gathering at the hill of Uslan in each Beltain in medieval Ireland, where a sacrifice was made to a god named Baal, that is Baal. Keating wrote that 2 bonfires would be lit in every district of land, and cattle would be driven between them to protect them from disease. So in this Irish version, instead of people passing through the fires or between the fires, cattle would be so honoured. But the principle remains the same. The idea behind the practice is the same. It has the same origin. It also says that the different cakes and other offerings were made for it. A bit of one of the cakes would be offered to the spirits to protect their livestock, one bit to protect the horses, one bit to protect the sheep, and so forth. And a bit was offered to each of the animals that might harm their livestock, one to the fox, one to the eagle, and the like. Afterwards they would drink a beverage of hot, thick, alcoholic content. According to 18th century writers in parts of Scotland, there was another ritual involving an oatmeal cake. The cake would be cut and one of the slices marked with charcoal. And the cakes would then be put in a bonnet, and everyone would take one out while blindfolded. According to one writer, whoever got the marked piece, the piece with the mark on it, would have to leap through the fire 3 times. According to another, this person would pretend to throw him into the fire, and for some time afterwards they would speak of him as if he were dead. This may embody a memory of actual human sacrifice, or it may always have been symbolic, but apparently it was. This is what it was. It was a memory of actual human sacrifice. In the past, they had done a kind of lottery with pieces of cake, and whoever took out the marked piece of cake was thrown into the fire. Afterwards, with the procession of time, people apparently became more civilized, more humane, so they did a kind of pantomime, repeating the process, but not actually throwing the person into the fire, but making themselves out as if they were to do so. and the victim would be related to for a while after that as if he really had been sacrificed, as if he was dead. So this is the same as the ancient Israelites had done, and it had continued until relatively recent times. In some areas it still exists, and also attempts by modern-day pagans to revive it, to continue this practice, or something similar to it. We also have an entry from the Encyclopedia Britannica. It tells us Beltain, we're reading out also a few excerpts here. It was a festival held on the first day of May in Ireland and Scotland, celebrating the beginning of summer and open pasturing. It is mentioned in a glossary attributed to Cormac, Bishop of Cashel and King of Munster, who was killed in 908 CE. And Cormac describes how cattle were driven between two bonfires on Beltain as a magical means of protecting them from disease before they were led into summer pastures, a custom still observed in Ireland in the 19th century. Other festivities include maypole dances and cutting of green boughs and flowers. Cormac derives the word Beltain from the name of god Baal or Baal, and the Old Irish word Taine, meaning fire. So we see that the worship of the Beltain was related to the worship of Baal, and it was similar to the custom of Moloch. And Moloch had also been associated with Baal, as we saw in Jeremiah 23:35. The 10 tribes have been exiled for practicing pagan customs. This included the worship of Baal, to see 2 Kings 17:16. Many from the 10 tribes were later to be found in Britain and Ireland in the West. And we saw how the ceremonies connected with Moloch, they included human sacrifice by burning children alive in the fires, or simply not human sacrifice but passing the children between 2 fires, or over the fires, or jumping over the fires. So too in the Beltain the fires were jumped over or passed between, or the object to be blessed was passed between the fires. And in the past, human sacrifice had also been involved. Human beings had apparently been thrown in the fires and burnt up. So this is very similar to what they had done in Bible times. And this shows that there was a continuation of the pagan practices that the Israelites had adopted from the peoples around them before they were exiled. In the places of exile, they continued to do the same or something similar. And they kept on doing it for centuries, up until a few years ago. They continued to do it. And in some places they still do it now. And the rationale between this type of sacrifice may even be reflected in some of our attitudes. And modern society, modern enlightened society, have a similar attitude towards in other ways, in other areas, but the rationale, the explanation, the justification is the same. Nowadays, social workers and others and the media and all kinds of pressure groups, they almost forced people who don't know any better, or people who are not well off, who have children and are expecting more children, to commit abortions, to kill a fetus. This is quite common. It's done everywhere. We're not saying that any specific nation is to blame more than others. In Israel they do it. In Britain they do it. In the USA they do it. In Western Europe they do it. They do it all over the civilized world, all over the Israelite nations. They kill babies, unborn babies, because they think to have the baby being born is going to place a burden on society, it's going to place a burden on society, to place a burden on the woman in question, and so on. And in many cases it's been proven that woman does not really want to carry out the abortion, and that she's better off if she had not have done so. And in some cases, because the woman has an abortion, accidents due to the abortion come about, and the woman cannot have children later, and there was no real reason for it. All events, it is prophesied in the end times the Israelites, that is the 10 tribes and Judah, will return and worship the God of Israel, and things will be made correct. Hosea 2, verse 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 tells us, it will come about in that day, declares the Lord, that you will call me Ishi, that is my name, you'll call me Ishi, that is my man, my husband, and will no longer call me Baali. And for I will remove the name of the Baals, for I will remove the names of the Baals from her mouth, so that they will not be mentioned by their names no more. I will betroth you to, from verse 19 onwards, I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and in compassion. And I will betroth you to me in faithfulness. Then you will know the Lord. May the Lord God of Israel bless all of you. Thank you.